Okay, so welcome to this module. Here is where the rubber actually meets the road. And Mission Impossible, one of my favorite things as a kid. Your mission, should you decide to accept it, is to do an n equals 1 experiment. Now, n equals 1 is really the idea that when you do a scientific experiment, n equals the number of participants in the experiment. And here, the 1 obviously is you. And there's more and more people talking about this as a concept now. But it's about each of us being willing to take member responsibility for our health and actually explore and see, is this real? Is what I'm talking about actually real? Or is it not? And you need to know enough to do it well and take this process step by step yourself. But that's what it's going to take. It's about you exploring effectively within certain parameters, within certain things about what to eat and what not to eat, and I'm going to lay that out in this section. The main instruments of mass destruction, it's not global warfare, it's not terrorism, it's not nuclear war, it's actually these things: knives, forks and spoons. And I say, isn't it time we really learned how to best use them? So that's what we're going to do here. And we've talked a lot about carbohydrates. Now it's time to get down to the real nitty-gritty. And this is a target I loved. I've just used it as an example to show you what kind of to aim for. I was a New Zealand intermediate champion archer when I was younger, and I spent a lot of time putting arrows into a target like this. So it's just a favorite part of my life, that was. So anyway, this comes from Dr. Westman, New Atkins from New Year. If there's no contraindications, like we talked about in Zishan's slide about porphyria and things like that, so if there's no contraindications to reducing carbohydrates, because carbohydrates aren't an essential part of the diet, then start with 20 grams a day. And I'll show you what 20 grams a day looks like in a minute, but I just want to show you the strategy here first. Now, if you don't get a result with 20 grams a day, you may need to go down 10 to 10 grams a day, and you may actually need to go all the way down to 0. Nothing wrong with that. You're not going to die. At least give it 30 days to figure that piece out. And then once you've got some results, like either your waist is reducing, your clothes are getting looser, you're feeling better. The idea, and you don't ever have to actually do this, you can stay the way you were, but if you wanted to find out what I call your personal carbohydrate tolerance level is, then you test that. Remember that n equals 1, and you just go up 5 grams a day, week after week. So once you've settled down and you've actually got some good results happening, and if you want to see how many carbohydrates you personally can handle, then you can go up 5 grams a day, and I'll show you how you can do that. So not like you don't start on Monday with, say you've been doing 20 grams for a while, you're good at that. You don't start with 25 on Monday and then 30 on Tuesday. You do 25 for the whole week. See how you've gone. Has your waist measurements got better, or worse? Has your clothes got looser or tighter? Does your personal energy feel better or worse? So, and then if it's all good, then next week you can try another 5 grams and then just work from there. And David Perlmutter, remember Grain Brain? He says go to a maximum of 60 to 80 grams a day if you find those symptoms don't return, the ones I've been talking with or other ones that you're specifically working with. And he says 60 to 80 grams a day in terms of looking after your brain is probably about it. Whereas if you look at Tim Noakes, when we talked about him, because he's been working with athletes, he says top athletes shouldn't need more than 200 grams of carbohydrate a day. So the idea is for you to find out your personal carbohydrate tolerance. But it's one thing to talk about those numbers, but how do you actually count the carbohydrate content in your food? Well, if it's not on the label, and I do recommend real food, one of the Robert Lustiger I've talked quite a bit about, he actually doesn't really put himself in the low carb healthy fat or low carb high fat camp. He puts himself more in the whole food camp. And if you're in a whole food camp, you don't have labels. Like if the, and so you're going to have to look. You have to Google what it is. And I recommend you learn to basically everything you put in your mouth for a while, you figure out how many carbohydrates are in it, and then you can plan whether you're going to eat it or not, for one thing. But it also gives you an idea of where you're at. And until you actually know what everything in you, have a rough idea of what everything you put in your body, how much carbohydrate it has in it, then you're really not doing this properly. So you've got to get your head around this. And I'm going to take you through a number of foods. So basically you go to Google and you look at the particular food you're looking at, and then you put in the word nutrition. So here what I've done is I've put in broccoli nutrition, and then a lot of the time you'll get a little screen like that show up on the right hand side, and you'll be able to look at the arrows and pick it and see, you can see, I've picked a particular amount of broccoli there, and it tells you how much is in that. And it's a decent amount of carbohydrates in there. So vegetables have carbohydrate. Often people we think that it's just breads, rice, grains. Those have carbohydrates, and vegetables are scot-free. Well, they're not. And you develop the idea. I created this thought of having a carb budget, like to basically to live within your carbohydrate tolerance level. You need to look at it like you've got a budget, like you've got so many dollars to spend in a day. And the carb budget of 20 grams a day, so you've got $20, 20 grams of carbs to spend in a day. How are you going to spend it? And remember, to stay within your budget, you don't have to spend all of it. You can just spend some of it. But I wanted to get apples out of the way to begin with. If you look at one apple, a medium-sized apple has 25 grams of carbohydrate in it. So if you're looking at 20 grams, and the idea of, we do look at the total carbohydrate. Some people used to look at the idea of net carbohydrates, where they'd take those 4.4 grams of dietary fiber off, so they're just over 20, and they thought that was the way to do it. But Dr. Westman, who's been working with us in clinic for 20 plus years, realized over time, even in his book, or their book, New Atkins for a New You, they talked about using net carbohydrates, but in a follow-up video he says he got that wrong. It's really better to work with total carbohydrates. Whether that's because the bacteria in your gut can actually digest some of that fiber and turn it into sugar, there's multiple options. But he's very clear to be properly doing this, work with total carbohydrate. So if you're looking at total, remember we all need to start with a total carbohydrate budget of 20 grams a day. Then an apple blows that out of the water. And that's where I say an apple a day doesn't necessarily keep the doctor away. A lot of people revert to nuts, thinking nuts are healthy. So I wanted to look at cashews, and you can see there that cashews. This is 100 grams of cashews. It's easy to have a little bag of nuts of cashews, isn't it? 30 grams of total carbohydrate. So you really blow that out of the water. So really best to keep nuts out of the picture. Use them as testing. When you got 5 grams a day, you can start using them as testing. Onion. A lot of people think surely there's no carbs in onion. But if you look at that, there's 7 grams of carbohydrate in a small onion. And the fascinating thing about vegetables is that when you cook those vegetables, you actually increase the carbohydrate content. That's why when you cook a carrot, it actually tastes sweeter, because it is sweeter. There's more sugar available to your body. That's already pre-digested by the cooking. And as a rough rule of thumb, you double the carbohydrate content. So sometimes a bit less. So 7 grams of carbohydrate in a small onion, it can become, say, 10 to 14 grams in a cooked onion. And it's easy to throw one small onion and chop it up and have it with some steak or mushrooms or whatever, and all of a sudden you're up to 14 grams just in the onion. So blueberries are a useful thing to have. Like when you're at that point of, generally I recommend no fruit at the beginning. And when you're starting to increase, like you've stabilized out, everything's moving in the right direction, and you want to test your carbohydrate tolerance level, then a quarter cup of blueberries is 5 grams. So you can actually, that's a simple way that you can actually start to increase your carb budget in a conscious, well thought out way. Just add a quarter cup of blueberries. into your day. Wine, because you've got a carb budget, the whole idea is that it's not like a completely, diet devoid of pleasure. You do need to look at what you're eating and what it's got in it. So here, 180 mils of wine, still like white, red, not the sweet wines, not the Moscatos or something like that, just the dry wines. 5 grams and 100 mils, 180 mils. The thing about wine, though, is alcohol is a liver poison, so it's up to each of us. We each have kind of effects with that. But not only the effects on our body. I mean, I still do drink, but it's whether drinking that glass of wine, can you handle 1 or 2 glasses, or does it lead to 3 or 4? And then you're immediately stacking your grams up. But also, once you're through a couple of wines, are you then wanting to have dessert? So does it lead to other things? Lead to harder drugs in a way, more sugar. So you need to pay personal attention to that. And we'll each have a relationship to that we need to manage. And chocolate is another thing. So it's like when you've got a carb budget, it's like, well, I won't have a cup of broccoli, I'll have chocolate, say, or a wine. So you have to work it out into the budget. And I like Lindt 90% because it's 1 square of it. There's 10 squares in a block. 1 square is 1.25 grams. And there used to be a Lindt Arabica, which they've taken off the market now, but you can find other coffee chocolates. And one of my favorites indulgences was 1 square of Lindt and half a square of coffee chocolate. So basically I'm up to about 4 grams of carbohydrate in that context. And I'm even, chocolate's way down for me compared to what it used to be, but when I was in serious kind of learning to budget mode, that was one of the ways I fitted chocolate into my 20-gram budget. So another way to look at it is like what actually does, if you're just doing vegetables, what does 20 grams of carbohydrate per day look like? Because sometimes you really just can't be bothered measuring, and depending on you, like I do recommend that you learn what's in what. But if you just want a bigger picture and you can't be bothered, then at least you've got this information here. So broccoli, here's what 20 grams. So you get a cup of broccoli, half a cup of cooked onions, quarter cup of mushrooms, 1 raw pepper, half a cup of celery, and 2 cups of spinach. So spinach is not cooked. So if you're looking at that, you're looking at 20 grams. So that gives you a bit of an idea. We'll bring you back to this, not this particular slide, but just to give you an idea, there's quite a lot of vegetables in there. Now, Dr. Terry Walls is into 9 cups of vegetables a day. And they have question marks around that with the carbohydrate restriction, but it works for her. And I'm putting this out is that to try something, and then if you need to tweak and explore and listen to other people, then just know what you're doing. But in terms of the insulin resistance and keeping your carbs down, this is what 20 grams a day looks like. So, as I said, 1 cook of above ground veggies. So the whole idea is that above ground veggies have less than below ground vegetables, like sweet potato or pumpkin is an above ground vegetable, but it's a bit like carrot and beetroots, that kind of size. And then meat, chicken, fish, shellfish and eggs. So you could eat as much as you want of meat, chicken, fish, shellfish and eggs to satisfaction, and then you add those other things in. Also, this is for those people that particularly believe in fibre, but I think fibre is vastly overrated and has been shown to not really be a big deal. In fact, for some people it's actually better taking vegetables right out of the picture altogether, and that's where the 0 carb issue comes in. But if you're looking at using vegetables and then you're looking at going up, then remember we started at 20 grams and you go up to say 60, 80, but here's 50 grams, and that comes from protein power. Michael and Mary Danny would say we look to do 30 grams or 50 grams as a starting point or as a thing to aim for to limit down. And so if you get that 5 grams a day and you can get to 50 grams, okay, what does that look like? Well, here we go. So more veggies, cup of broccoli, cup of cabbage, half cup of peppers, half cup of onions, third of a cup of mushrooms, 1 cup of spinach, half cup of blueberries, 16 nuts, almonds. Remember, cashews are really quite heavier in carbs. You can fit some chocolate and some wine in there. You can do all that and still be under 60 grams. So that just gives you an idea. You've got variety, possibility, and not necessarily that you need to go there, but if you're following that path, then you've got plenty of options. But you've taken a lot of carbohydrates out of your diet, haven't you? So the key is, what do you replace it with? And this was one of David Perlmutter's Facebook posts. A ketogenic diet drives 80 to 90% of its calories from fat. And that sounds like a lot. And remember, we've been taught that fat's bad, and now we're starting to see that it's not bad. So there's that internal struggle we often go through about, gosh, that's a lot. But if you basically had bacon and eggs with a bit of onion and mushroom, you're basically up around that 80 to 90%. Cooked in some either animal fat is better, like lard or tallow. Those are the better things to have rather than butter. But that's when you do the maths, and I've got a page on my site, and I'll put it in here. It's actually showing you the maths on that. That is 80 to 90% of the calories from fat. So what fats to eat? The animal fats are the healthiest fats, and fish oils. And the healthiest way to have them is on the animal or on the fish. But if you need to add other things, certain supplements are good. So a lot of supplements have supplement fish oils are oxidized. You want to find a source of fish oil. If you're using a supplement form of fish oils, that they've encapsulated the oil in a nitrogen-rich environment, so there's no oxygen getting into oxidize that oil. Animal fats are very, very stable, like lard, and you probably have to go to a butcher to get those, lard or tallow. And lard is pig fat, and tallow is pig fat. And there's real serious questions about plant oils. There's a difference between seeds and fruits, like an olive oil, that's fruit oil, or a coconut oil, that's a fruit oil. Whereas seeds like sunflower seed, sesame seed, linseed, flaxseed, they're all seed oils, and they oxidize very fast. And there's a lot of research saying definitely stay away from seed oils, and even olive oil. If you don't press it yourself, like when I was in Italy recently, you can buy olive oil that's been produced in an oxygen-deprived environment. So in its container, there's no oxidation going on. And that's why they say don't leave it near sunlight and keep it in a dark bottle. So plant oils oxidize, and oxidized oils are just not good. There's even questions about butter. I know for myself, you might have heard of a bullet coffee, where you have coffee in the morning with butter. If I have that, my throat reacts, and I go and get catarrh, start coughing, and that's with butter. I don't get that without the butter. So it's the butter that has something in it that's just not best. So that's where I recommend cooking an animal fat other than butter. And so you get your fats from, there's a question mark about grass-fed and wild fish. I think if you can, that's best to do. But if you can't afford those kind of things, and most beef is grass-fed, it's just grain finished. And we're particularly lucky in New Zealand with that. But our pigs are fed all sorts of weird and wonderful things, so you have to question that a bit. Free-range chicken, that kind of thing. The thing is to learn to eat those things to satisfaction. If you've been overweight for any length of time, you'll tend to want to limit your food. You just unconsciously try to eat less rather than wanting to eat till you're satisfied. And that's a key thing, is about managing what food your body loves, is eating it to the point of satisfaction, not being overstuffed. And if you eat foods that don't bloat your body, then you won't eat till you're bloated. You'll just eat till you're satisfied, and that's a really, really good feeling. So eliminate seed oils, trans fats, question mark on olive oils, coconut oils, butter, and load up on those healthy fats and those good healthy meats. One way to look at this is produced by Dr. Eric Westman, is again, what do you eat on a less than 20 gram a day carb diet? And if you just wanted to look at what to eat rather than trying to figure out the carbs, this is one option for you. This is what I put it in here. And so you've got meat, poultry, seafood, eggs, 2 hearts content, and then limit these until the diabetes or whatever your condition is improved or eliminated. So salad greens, 2 cups a day, vegetables, 1 cup a day. Means you've got a list of them there, all the kind of things we've talked about. And he says that you must eat vegetables every day. I personally question that, so I'm going to hear more about that soon. Cheese limit to 4 ounces a day, so that's roughly 120 grams of cheese for those that work in grams. And cream as well, limit to 50 mils. So not much of that stuff. And telling statement here says he treats obesity the same way he treats diabetes. And basically, if you're obese and you haven't got diabetes yet, it's coming. So it's the same thing. It's not that obesity creates diabetes, the underlying insulin resistance is going on. If you've got diabetes, if you've got obesity, you will be getting diabetes at some point. And look at this slide here. Imagine this. This was diabetic cookery in 1917. So basically, all the things we've been talking about, you can see that lots of meat, fish, eggs, and vegetables are pinned down there. So all the ones we've been working with. Before they had insulin as a drug, that was how they handled diabetes. And it shouldn't only be how we handle diabetes. Remember that last slide showed you that Eric treats obesity and overweight like he does diabetes. Remember, it's the same thing, because it's your body's response to carbohydrate, your insulin response to carbohydrate, that ends up being a problem. So the idea that N equals 1 experiment is to look at it doing it. Sometimes it's too much to think about, to jump in and think you're going to do this for the rest of your life. So I'll just ask you to look at 30 days. Now do a month. See it as a reset or a reboot button, just like if your computer gets slow, you'll reboot it. So if you look at this as a reboot for your body, for your genes. And the first thing I'd recommend you do is try this. If this is philosophically and emotionally acceptable to you, I think this is the best way to start. So 30-day zero carb carnivore diet. So it's the reset or reboot button for your genes. Alex Stefansson did that. He basically did a lot of work up in the Arctic with the natives there. Don't even know what to call them, Eskimos anymore, it's not politically correct. But basically, those tribes he actually spent time with, and he lived like them. He came back and proved, it was at the time when vitamins were being discovered at the turn of the 20th century, and he wanted to show that you didn't need vitamins, you just needed a good, healthy meat, fish-based diet. And he and a friend basically they locked them in a ward. They could go in and out, but they basically controlled everything they showed them. But after a year, they're perfectly fine. Assumption is they're going to be fine. More than that, you can find it online. It's called The Fat of the Land, the book. It's a free PDF you can find. But basically, it's this idea. It's eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're satisfied. And if you look at, remember I mentioned Sophia Clemens from Hungary. She has a website called paleomedicina.com, and they're looking at in the clinical setting, what they find is best to have 2 grams of fat to every gram of protein. Some people recommend having, in terms of calories, double the fat to protein, but she actually recommends more than that. She recommends 2 grams of fat to every gram of protein. So that means on top of the meat, you're also adding some fat. So the lards, the tallows, those are the best things to have. And ruminants are particularly useful for us because they tend to have a higher fat content. Fish depends on the fish, and then eggs, of course, is unlimited. So you can eat as much of those things as you want, and you'll tend to only want to eat once or twice a day if you're filling up on those things and really eating to satisfaction. And so that's a really, really easy thing. And this is Scotch fillet, and in the States, I believe that's called a ribeye. And when I first started, remember I was a vegetarian for 35 years, vegan for 10 of those years, wheat-free. I was serious. And so when I started to think about this way of eating, I couldn't think about meat. All I could think about was I could eat some chicken, I could eat some fish. And I had that for, I wasn't allowed to cook at home, so I had to eat those kind of things when I was outside home. And then one day I remember we went to a restaurant and I smelt someone, after a few months of doing this, I smelt someone having a steak. I thought, oh, that smells really good. And I thought, well, next time I come out to dinner, I'll try one of those. And that's what happened. I did. A little while later, I went out to dinner again and I ordered a steak. And I honestly felt like I died and went to heaven. And it was such a visceral experience in my mind and body. Just things lit up. And I haven't changed from that. And we brought up our kids wheat-free vegan. And our oldest daughter, who had the longest period of time wheat-free vegan with us before we went back to vegetarian, she now likes her steak rarer than me. So that's an interesting thing to watch. That we are actually, ruminants are actually our favorite food. And as Sophia Clemens says, there's no real body types. We all really hunger for that because it's the fat we're looking for, and the ruminants have no fat. Aborigines, they used to hunt down kangaroos and stuff and check the fat first, and if there wasn't enough fat, they just left the animal, went and found something that's fatter. That's why they used things like witchetty grubs. I think it was something like 65-70% fat. They saw them as a delicacy. So our brains require energy, and fats are condensed energy, and it just really works. That whole ketone process is so powerful for us. And so on top of eating those things to satisfaction, remember to drink water to thirst. You don't need to overdo it. And this part, salt to taste. And I'll tell you more about how important salt is. But we've been taught for a long time to not eat salt or reduce salt. And that's actually completely incorrect, because what happens is when you have a high carbohydrate diet, the carbohydrates make the kidneys retain salt. And so when you go take the carbohydrates out, all of a sudden the kidneys are releasing salt. And there are studies showing that the more salt that comes out in your urine, the longer you live, because that's what your body needs to do. So all-cause mortality goes down when you increase the amount of salt coming out of your urine, but you don't get salt out of your urine. You've got to take carbohydrates out of your diet and learn to add salt in. And adding it to your taste is the best way to look at that, and it's good at the beginning to actually over-salt your food to get an idea of where your taste is. Because often we've been so salt restricted that we really don't know what the taste is. So it takes time to re-equilibrate. And some people like a lot more salt than others, so you don't need to really worry about it in terms of a number. So let's move on. So that was zero carb. So if you 30-day reset, you can do either zero carb or you can do low carb. And the low carb, remember, is about 20 grams a day. So that is Eric Westman's list. And basically it's eat when hungry, stop when satisfied. Same thing around meat, chicken, fish, shellfish, and eggs. And then limit carbohydrates to like 5 grams a meal, 3 times a day, and then if you have a snack, and then 5 grams for that. So basically, as I said, it's a half to a cup of mixed above ground cooked veggies, and leafy greens, 1 or 2 cups. And increase the healthy fats. Don't need to do that too much at the beginning, because if you're overweight, you want the fat to come from your body. Again, water to thirst, salt to taste. So remember, no fruit, no nuts, and no root veggies. Okay, so that's the 30-day reset for low carb. So remember, zero carbs, I think, the primary option, then low carb is a second step. If you can't handle the idea of zero carb, then this is a workable thing. I wanted to introduce you to the idea of offal being awesome. This was when I was eating more vegetables. I made a plate of, this is what I often had for breakfast, liver and veggies, fried up. So basically, the liver is really the most, if a predator hunts down an animal, they'll go for the liver first. And we used to share out the liver as a first option in tribal process. So by all means, reacquaint yourself with liver. We call it lamb's fry here in New Zealand. It's a really nutrient-rich food. I just sauteed this for 3 to 4 minutes in a teaspoon of butter as soon as I started having butter, and added more butter once it was cooked. and I like Celtic sea salt rather than Himalayan, and then I did some spices, rosemary and thyme. But nowadays I'll just have the liver without the veggies. I just wanted to show this because this is in the low carb, high fat section, and you can do those kind of things. So there's a whole idea of eating nose to tail, and there's two different opinions on this. There's some carnivores that do really well for decades just on meat, muscle meat, and other carnivores that say you need the offal as well. So that point is still undecided. Just wanted to let you know that. But along with this whole process, some people, if you have got an autoimmune issue, these meals were, pictures were taken by a client I was working with that had Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and so she showed some of her meals and she really done them out nicely. But basically, this is, Paleo Mom has got a whole section on this, but basically if you have an autoimmune condition, then eggs go out, so even if you're carnivore, you take the eggs out, nuts and seeds are out again, remember. Even coffee can stimulate triglycerides even for some people, so you'll hear more about triglycerides in a minute. But and also any seed-based spices, and then the nightshades like the peppers, and that includes paprika, because paprika is basically dried out peppers ground up. And then any gluten-reactive foods. It says limit fructose consumption. We've talked a lot about fructose. Alcohol is again a poison. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, aspirin, ibuprofen, non-nutritive sweeteners, yes, all of them, even stevia. So even your blood insulin levels can actually spike just with anything sweet tasting, so your body can think it's got sugar coming, so it just pumps it out. So some people are worse than others, so the whole idea of sweeteners that aren't, artificial sweeteners that aren't sugar, be careful. And then emulsifiers and other additives and things like that. So if you've got an autoimmune protocol, you can kind of see that in terms of moving towards, the choice of making low carb or zero carb, when you see the list of vegetables you have to eliminate, then the tendency is to think, well, maybe zero carb really makes a lot of sense if you've got an autoimmune issue going on. And if you have, I'd recommend, you can actually use a list like that and eat the other things, see what your body can work with and what it can't, or actually just go to trying a zero carb option. And I'm going to talk about vegetarianism, so I'm going to give you options to do this kind of diet, either being vegetarian or vegan. I understand it can be a big issue to change. It took me years to make that decision myself, and I can only say I'm really glad I did. And I would encourage you to question your philosophy if that's an issue for you. And I didn't read this before I changed my diet, but if you are a vegetarian and have, whether it's a political motivation, emotional, spiritual, health-wise, whatever it is, I highly recommend Leah Keith's book, The Vegetarian Myth. She basically wrecked her diet, wrecked her body from 20 years of vegan eating. It's an enlightening book, and if you want to question being a vegetarian, obviously you don't want to question it, you're not going to read it, but I highly recommend you do if you're basically starting to look at that questioning process. And that's really about really being honest with ourselves. And I'm going to show you how to apply this kind of diet as a vegetarian, but if you're committed to being a vegetarian, I ask you to commit to being honest, getting all the tests you need doing over time, and being willing to change, to think differently. Remember, it's all about belief. If you start to go downhill. Remember, 2004, I looked pretty healthy. 2005, signs of inflammation started in my body with the rosacea and the blepharitis. 2007, cancer. 2009, when I got my first blood fat test, it was probably bad before that. That was bad, and that's certainly my journey. And that was after 35, nearly 40 years of vegetarian eating. So think again before you keep this as a long-term strategy. But if you do, here we go. And these are some thoughts. Again, I've taken this from a New Atkins, from New You. And basically, it's hard to limit carbohydrates to below 20 and be a vegetarian. So recommend limiting to 30 grams per day. Or you can do 50 grams a day, That's why I showed you those 2 slides before, for more variety and slower weight loss. And for some people, this will actually work. So again, eat when hungry, stop when satisfied. Eggs, if you still eat eggs, that's great. If you don't, then you have to do without them. Cheese, there's different kind of cheese products you can buy. Soy products. You introduce nuts and seeds this time before you introduce berries. And again, half to 1 cup of mixed above ground cooked veggies, leafy greens, 1 to 2 cups. And the oils you are going to be wanting to use things like flaxseed, olive and walnut. So use the fruit oils rather than the seed oils. Again, water to taste. So, water to thirst and salt to taste. So you're not eating the meats here, you're eating those other things. Again, limit fruit, so eliminate fruit at the beginning. You can use blueberries to do your ramping up, and be careful with nuts. So again, keep them out of the beginning, as keep out root vegetables as well. And if you're autoimmune and vegetarian, eliminate some of those red peppers and that kind of thing. So next step is the 30-day reset, being a vegan. So again, I was vegan for many years and looked remarkably healthy, but then things fell apart. But if you're committed to being vegan, you can do it. Again, it's even harder to limit carbohydrates below 20, so the recommendation is to limit it to at least 50. So you've learned how to count carbohydrates, so you just need to keep that in mind when you do this. Again, eat when hungry, stop when satisfied. You'll need to eat seeds, nuts, soy products, soy and rice cheeses, seitan, pulses, that's things like lentils, and high protein grains. So you can get some protein, and then you're going to acknowledge you're eating more carbohydrates than otherwise you can if you're eating a zero carb or low carb diet. But then you need to remember the oils, and I'll tell you a bit about how to handle the amount of oils you eat in a minute. But you're obviously not eating meat. Again, you want to limit those kind of fruits at the beginning, and the root vegetables. And apart from that, you are good to go. So we've covered how to count carbohydrates, and then just different options on diets. And you'll choose one, but remember you're going to give it a 30-day blast, and then keep a diary if you need to, and keep a track of it. You are your N equals 1, and pay attention to what's going on. Remember to listen to your body, see what it's doing, and if it's not responding as well, like in terms of the way you want it to, you may have to reduce your carbs more at the beginning before you then start to increase and find out where your limit actually is. We all have, remember, a personal carbohydrate tolerance level we need to find, and a carbohydrate budget that we need to stay within to be healthy.